Hey guys, welcome back to the Ramble. I am your humble host, Maria Legier, and this is something I did not originally intend to upload, but I was sitting here on a Sunday with nothing to do, and this chronic pain condition of mine has been bothering me something awful lately, so I couldn't do anything too tiring, and so I stumbled over this writing and decided to fix it up a bit. This is an old friend of mine. There's too much to think tonight. The lonely wail of a vacuum cleaner is heard in the distance, lonesome and weird, howling and crying into a blue and starless night. The moon, caught once more in weird and flaccid bedroom despair, staring through the open bedroom window, resembling a vampire or a salivating succubi clothed in silver silk, spotted here and there with deep red stains of blood. A mind now crowded, fully booked and operated by operatic troglodytes that chatter, scream and holler vague obscenities into the cerebral matrix core, the aluminium insomniac bore, a dull, slow, careful throbbing in the back of the mind, drilling through the tectonic plates of reason and of life. There's just too much to think tonight. And I remember him well, seeing him there, in a crowded room, in a past life. The boy was alive back then and in there, running wild, feather-free and unencumbered through abandoned hallways that stank and reeked of public school. All unwashed urinals and pavement walls, all whitewashed, sterile, dull, eternally lifeless and ever so goddamned boring. Where only accepted art decorated the pungent walls and bulging chalk-stained floors. Art that sought to crush the spirit. Art that burnt and bruised any instinct to get out. Propaganda posters on the walls pinned up by pin-up protesting political students of the political class, whose words and thoughts were laws unto themselves. Much a foreshadowing of the latter-day warriors for social justice, in fact. A lifeless tragedy reflected in stainless steel sheet paper music. Wicked snare drum clickety-clacks, the crazy vague whisperings of preposterous pondering pedagogues with a faceplant planted neatly in textbook educations, in real-life separations, in ink wish wells that stank of pharmacological cologne. There's just too much to think. Crowded headspace rigmarole, late-stage abortions of thought and eagerness to think. Concentration brought scatterbrained infantilism from fragile fire-fueled preachers of occupational platitudes. Attitudes and behaviors such as these are hazardous to the health and strange well-being of classroom occupants of varying degrees of variable conformity. Concentration camp pills are necessary to chain the boy and boyhood dream to chairs of stainless silverware, to force him, as it were, to sit still and free of fancy, devoid of energy. Straight from the occupational hazard of parasitical pedagogues to the limelight of pill-popping lunacy. Straight razor-blade smiles drawn across a face stitched back together following bludgeon bellows. Scorned by mocking laughter and minuscule purgatorial bliss. Amphetamine sparkles in the air, sudden smell of burnt hair, strokes and hand-waving away of energy and boundless daydream longing. There's just no room to move. Drawn across the classroom floor or in the auditoriums as silent as a doorbell mouse, strange and peculiar unseen blood trickling from ears and eyes that used to see. Seeing nothing now but lines in ink and black and white on blackboards drawn in chalk and in despair. In his despair, where vacuum-stained apartments are free to rent within his cranial cavity. Within his snarling mercury voice that called beyond reason and beyond hope from a descending wallop. The permanent amphetamine sulfate dance. Maybe not as disturbing as a permanent amphetamine sulfate dance in truth. Only almost, only just. Merely the concerted and concerning grip of concerta upon his mind and neurological makeup. Such a travesty of confusing grips that shook his brains and shackled his body, bursting it at once in on itself so as to mirror a calmed, focused, studious will to study in breakroom classrooms barred and chained. His will focused through drugs, his nature curb-stomped and left for dead by drugs. I knew him back then, in hazy schoolboy days. I saw him lost in space and lost in time. The entirety of his personality, his core and his essence torn from him, the bubbling energy and will to run, to play, to make pretend in boundless, eager fantasy ripped and pulled away from him. Essentially his essence stolen, wrapped in white pills, then pushed away for being disruptive, for being energetic, for being refused to run and burn through energy, being forced to sit in stunned silence, drugged into conformity, preyed upon by piss-pot pedagogues and pondering psychiatrists who never cared to see the truth of boyish nature, the practical before the theoretical, the need to use his body and burn his energy in order to then sit still and study. There's just no room to sleep when my thoughts run haywire and needs to be expressed, bothersome as they may well be. At times, it gets way too crowded in this havocked headspace of mine to think properly. I am finishing this piece after having it stood untouched for close to 4 weeks. It was originally written during one of my frequent nights or mornings I can't properly remember of insomnia. I dismissed it immediately as having absolutely no value but some purely personal catharsis at the moment of writing, an immediate bloodletting, so to speak. Yet, it was not until I began writing this during that night or early morning that I realized what was burning in my mind at the moment, keeping me from sleep. It was this friend of mine. Looking back at this piece now, when the dust from that fight with insomnia has settled, the piece does seem to offer something more than the purely cathartic, hence this addendum and an upload. It was this friend of mine. All but 10 years old, and deemed to be too energetic, diagnosed with ADHD with nothing but a wink and a nod. ADHD is, of course, something that must be expelled, exterminated, exorcised from the brooding boyish body lest he disrupt the fucking studying, ruining it for the rest of the fucking class. I knew him very well back then. In fact, he was a very close friend of mine. We still keep in touch, though we are not as close as we were back then. And he was as close a friend as one could have when being 10 years old. Strange that him and his diagnosis should pop up in my mind 23 odd years later, but that's what happens during strange sleepless nights. Particularly so when writing on the kinds of topics which I tend to write on. There is a certain preoccupation, one could almost say obsession, at times with the state of the world, seeing it through the vague waves of the proverbial red pill, things that seemed very clear-cut and obvious back in the dazed blue pill days. Doctors said it, teachers said it, he needed treatment, he needed medication. Seems a bit more dubious in light of the new day, or, well, in light of the new night, as may well be the case. As is the case with this friend of mine. His personality changed completely after his diagnosis and subsequent treatment, his drugging, and it was really strange. A relatively gradual change, as these things of course are. To those of us who knew him, it seemed as though all his sense of fun, all his energy, all his eagerness to play pretend had been sucked out of him. I know many who have been diagnosed with ADHD or ADD, all of whom were boys. But I knew none of them as well as I knew this friend of mine. And to be clear, I am in no way qualified to speak on ADHD. Still, I can't deny my thoughts access to paper, so to speak, particularly not when they are knocking at my skull, demanding to come out. I understand it to be a somewhat controversial diagnosis, and the drugs used to mend it even more so. I understand that it is mainly young boys who are diagnosed with it, an overwhelming amount in fact. Which leads me to believe that teachers, being mainly female, simply cannot handle, or understand, for that matter, natural boyish energy, deeming it disruptive in class. In so doing, they may well be seeking a simple solution to a problem that does not necessarily exist as anything but a problem with the way schools treat boys. Which leads me to believe that ADHD and ADD at the very least is highly overdiagnosed, and its medication highly overprescribed. Considering only those whom I know or have had dealings with over the course of my life who were diagnosed with one of the two at a young age, and we're talking about quite a few boys who may very well have been nothing but energetic. Particularly interesting, to me at least, is this. In schools, class have become longer and the free time between them becomes shorter. Less free time, more time spent locked to a desk in classrooms. Not the best way to burn off excess energy, one should think. The way schools teach their students are very much geared towards a feminine way of learning. Once again, the feminine is the default, the masculine a deviation. Articles have been popping up recently, quite a few of them actually, about how boys and young men struggle in schools. Strange that this should happen, one should think, sarcastically, while sniggering sardonically, when schools have done nothing for the past 30 years but build up girls, at the expense of boys. With all female this and all female that. Girls must be empowered, don't you know? Boys need not apply. No boys only stuff allowed, for that would be discriminatory. Below I have linked 2 articles from the BBC on the topic. This is not something that is only happening in Great Britain. It appears to be happening over most of the Western world. Boys drop out, and any attempt at helping boys and young men in education is met with the wrath and ire of feminism scorned, demanding that boys be pushed away and girls pushed to the front. Only girls must receive help, even when it is clear, blatant and bloody obvious that boys are the ones that struggle the most, particularly where education is concerned. For, as is always the case, focusing on girls and helping only girls is quite alright. Focusing on boys and helping them is discrimination par excellence. That is just the way it is, even when boys are the ones who are damned well struggling. A strange thing in a society that prides itself oh so much on its equal treatment of all and sundry. As long as those that demand to be treated with equal care, compassion and consideration are not boys, of course. And it still remains incredibly strange to me that what is labelled equal treatment of the sexes consists of giving girls and women what boys and men have not, under the pretense that boys and men already have it and have had it for all of history. This despite it never being there as something tangible, something experienced directly by boys and men. Just an invisible patriarchy whose existence is made evident by nothing but look around you, doing nothing but helping boys and pushing girls down, despite girls being helped and boys not being helped. As one learns if one is partly awake, no one knows the lives of boys and men better than feminist women who have, after all, studied mass gender succulence, critical gender analyticals, intricate vaginal opulence, phallocentric oligarchies and basket weaving through a non-gender binary lens in universities, and so know exactly what and how boys and men experience and live and think. Boys and men know absolutely nothing about their own lives and experiences in society, because of course we don't. We haven't studied it. Women's lived experience are of incredible importance. Men's lived experience is not, for only women know what men's lived experience is like. It sure as hell appears to be the case, when taking into account that boys and men are not listened to, their advocates routinely mocked, shunned, whipped and ridiculed from one side of the political spectrum to the next. Feminism is allowed to speak on what men need, which, as it transpires, is what men need to do to help women and so in turn help themselves by fixing themselves so that they can be of more help to women, by which they of course mean feminism. Men's rights advocates seem to exist in a peculiar state of free-falling, as it were, receiving plenty of scorn and ridicule from all and sundry. Left and right matters little. Both left and right agree that us filthy MRAs are either this chosen smear from the left or that chosen smear from the right. All agree that advocating for gender equality, for human rights from the perspective of a man, or by looking to how men are doing, is not something one does. And it's really strange, like I said, when living in a society that claims everyone deserves to be listened to and taken seriously, treated with the same amount of respect or whatever. Alas, boys are to be helped with the subtle and loving caress of powerful drugs, which may very well be of more help to the teachers than the boys in question. The masculine is a problem to be solved, and so is boyish nature. It is a pathological ideology masquerading as an identity according to the pestilent school of psychiatry, something to be dubbed toxic and done away with. No wonder boys drop out. No wonder men became, quote, obsolete, unquote. Thank you very much for watching. Here follows an outro most befitting a video of this nature, a blatant attempt at virtual panhandling. Should you wish to support this channel, as well as my blog and any further endeavors this strange path will take me on, there are a few ways you can do that. The easiest would be to like, share and subscribe, as well as clicking the sometimes functional notification bell. Having the message, such as it is, manspread and mansplained far and wide will do wonders. You could also support my rambling and barely contained insanity by buying my books, which are linked below. More books will be made available as time allows. I also have a Redbubble shop, linked below, where you can buy prints in various forms of some of the artwork presented in my videos. Or you can contact me through the contact form on my blog for original artwork, commissions or prints direct from the source, so to speak. Until next time, I am your humble bearded bard, Morea Legier, manspreading majestically beneath the steel sky of doom.